So I would say 99.8% of firms do not want a chief behavioral officer. At the same time, I would say 100% of financial planning firms want to make better decisions, form sturdier habits, and achieve higher well-being.
Hey friends, it's Tim, and you're listening to Wealth Beyond Riches, a show about reclaiming our relationship with work and money. Isn't it true that we all start out with the best intentions, but somewhere along the way in our career path, we're becoming wealthier and busier and also more lonely as time goes by? Today's conversation is with one of the most brilliant minds at the intersection of money and emotions, Brian Portnoy. He's a friend. His life's work is helping people reclaim their relationship with money. And one of the ways he's done that is really interesting. He's scaled this mission by not helping you, but by training your financial advisor. So in a minute, he'll tell you about all the hats that he wears, but I'll tell you he's an amazing friend, a CEO, an entrepreneur, and he's also one of the best at putting words to important things. You're going to get a lot out of this conversation as we tackle financial well-being, finding purpose in our work, even through multiple career changes, and also Brian's own personal journey of generosity, which started with the Hebrew tradition of tikkun olam. He also shares with us what the world's expert on studying ants can teach us about wisdom. He'll talk about ranking financial advisors along with doctors, therapists, and clergy as one of the main people who can help us with our holistic well-being. And I love this idea of funded contentment that he coined that has really impacted me personally, and I think it's going to change your thinking about what it means to be truly wealthy. And I've got to say this. If you're looking for another smart money show about hacking your way to riches, this isn't it. This goes 1 to 2 to 3 layers deeper, where our guests have thought long and hard about their relationship with work and also with their finances, so that they can leverage their purpose and calling to have a greater impact on the world. My hope for you is that you hear something that moves your life closer 1% to your true purpose. This is going to be good. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We've talked to a couple different people throughout the last couple episodes, and we've had a couple athletes, a couple coaches, and you're the first finance guy. I hate getting that term myself, but you and I are both in the finance world, and we stumbled across each other on LinkedIn. Right. I think you were creeping on me, and I got a little notification just to make it real awkward to begin. And I was like,
what does that mean? I was creeping on you.
It said, bad. I know. It said Brian was checking out your profile. It's normal. Everybody does it, but we call it creeping these days. And I was like, hey, why'd you stop by? And you were like, hey, I'm passionate about leading others in generosity. And I was like, me too. So that's how the conversation got started. But tell me, walk me kind of through like, who is Brian Portnoy, and walk me through like, who are you, and what have you done, and what are you working on right now?
Yeah. So who am I? Father, husband, writer, entrepreneur, friend. You know, we all have lots of identities, and I take a number of them pretty seriously.
Yeah.
You know, in the boring narrow lane of work, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Shaping Wealth, and it's a coaching and content platform to help people achieve financial well-being, which obviously a topic we're going to dive into.
Yeah.
But going back in time, sadly to say, quarter century, I've spent a lot of time in the investment business, researching, investing in complex investments on behalf of individual and institutional investors. And about 12, 13 years ago, began to read voraciously in the field of behavioral science. Just what makes us tick? How do we make decisions? How do we figure out how to navigate this crazy world?
Yeah.
And I loved it so much, I went on to write 3 books in the space. So published a book on investment decision-making in 2014 called The Investor's Paradox, published a more philosophical tract called The Geometry of Wealth. And
you mean this guy right here?
Yeah, that guy right there. And the subtitle matters, you know, How to Shape a Life of Money and Meaning. So it's a book about what is a meaningful life, something that you and I have connected on. But then to ask the subsequent important question, well, how does money figure into all of that? And then, as I've, built out a coaching platform for the financial advisor space, another guy named Josh Brown and I published a book at this point 3 years ago called How I Invest My Money, which should have been called Why I Invest My Money. But it was just sort of delving into the stories that define our money life and why it can be both hard and liberating to tell those stories.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here to where I am right now.
Yeah. I love I've been reading through the Geometry of Wealth lately, and I feel like as I'm reading it, I have like this kinsmanship with you of like, oh my goodness, these are things I didn't have words for, and you gave words to them, which is going to impact me and it's going to impact our clients, which is amazing. I love you said, I think I wrote the wrong book first, and,
Right.
and this one should have come first.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal. It's sort of clever, but also real that, I describe the Geometry of Wealth as a prequel, because I did write a more middle of the fairway book about making better investments. The one called The Investor's Paradox.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of that, and it was well received. But by the end of that, it was sort of close to 15 years into an investment career. I just really began to, Tim, struggle with like, well, what is that even like? Who cares about the market? Who cares about picking the right mutual fund or trying to identify the next Amazon or Netflix or things like that? And recognize not only from a professional point of view, but 10 years ago, my kids were 10 years younger. Just really thinking about the world that they were growing into, and maybe I could put something on paper that was meaningful to them. So there was no way for me intellectually or spiritually to write the right book first. I had to go down that path and then discover a lot of different things, to ask more questions than come up with answers in order to come up with the Geometry of Wealth as a quote unquote prequel to earlier work.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I even love how you just frame it's kind of like a legacy piece. Like, what can I pass on to my kids? We can pass on our assets, but we can also pass on our values. And if we had to choose, we would want to pass on the values. So I love that, how it's like, what could I tell them about money and how to navigate it, because it's something we have to do and we have to face it.
Yeah. And, something you said earlier, Tim, was really meaningful to me, and I take it seriously. And in some ways it's my life's work, which is kind of putting words to important things.
Yeah.
I think I'm not bad at that. And I've heard countless times over many years that, whether it's on making good investments or thinking about the sources of true happiness in life or a number of topics, like I take the craft of writing and communicating pretty seriously. And so someone, who's as successful and accomplished as you in the financial planning space, if I'm helping you put words to things that matter not only to your clients, but to you and your family, I mean, that's kind of like, that's when I've felt like I've done good work, like capital W work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. And it's true. And here, I'm going to give people a taste for it. Which there's nothing probably more awkward than somebody else reading your writing out loud. But this paragraph hit me. It's on page 2, guys. So if you pick up the book, you don't have to get very far. But you just say, we begin by distinguishing rich from wealthy. Being rich is having more. The push for more is a treadmill on which satisfaction is typically fleeting. The quest to be rich usually doesn't end where many of its sojourners think it will. Wealth, by contrast, is funded contentment. It is the ability to underwrite a meaningful life, however one chooses to define that. Ultimately, I contend that wealth is achievable for many, including those who despair it is out of reach. Here's the catch. Wealth, truly defined, is only achievable in the context of a life in which purpose and practice are thoughtfully calibrated. In isolation, neither deep thoughts nor long checklists is up to the task. To succeed, clear minds and dirty hands must work together. So I would agree, you're not bad at putting words to things. So that incredible paragraph, and I know funded contentment is a phrase that is pervasive through any of your work. And the first time I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, that's it. Because as you're helping clients plan, you're like, what is the chief end of all this stuff? And, in a world where we have excess and more than we need, how do we define how much is enough? And how do we define how we're going to spend our time when we have more time than ever, more money than ever? I think if someone headed into retirement, if they don't define that stuff in those years leading up to it, then it's going to be pretty difficult and maybe even fruitless, no matter how much stuff that they have. So I love that you're just tackling this topic, and not only it's impacting the entire industry, which is super cool. So
Appreciate that.
Thanks for doing that. So when I was just thinking of this, when you started writing, was that like I'm stopping my current career and I'm just going to start writing, or what did that look like? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, it just came about from my own, maybe it was a midlife crisis. I'm not sure how to, define the boundaries around one of those. But I was in my early 40s at the time, and
Okay.
wondering, out loud, like, hey, have I chosen the right career? And am I a good husband? Am I a good dad? Like, how do I figure all this stuff out? Going back, I started my career in academia, so I have some history of scholarship and writing, and it's always been meaningful to me, just not in the analytic sense, but in the emotional sense. So, when I began writing in earnest, I would say 2011, 2012, it was always an outlet. It was never in lieu of something else. And I actually, Tim, distinctly remember, when I was drafting. So Investor's Paradox came out in 2014, which means it was done by 2013, which means I started writing it in 2011.
Yeah, right.
Take forever. You could bang out a blog in a day and boom, it's on Substack and you're good.
Well, in the paragraph I just read, you're probably like, I do remember writing that. I think it was a long time ago, even though it came out like 5 years ago.
Exactly. It was a very long time ago. But so it was never, it's never been the only thing. It was always in addition to, and it made me feel whole. It makes me feel whole. That ability to express one's identity. I really only try to write about the things I care about. And when you think about our favorite writers and bloggers and Substackers, if that's even a term, it's because they're sharing with us what they truly believe. They've made themselves vulnerable, and for whatever reason, I've always been comfortable with that. I mean, in all three of the books that I've written, or in the last one edited, although I contributed a chapter, I've always been willing and able to say this is what's in my heart and this is what's on my mind. And it wasn't a marketing ploy, but at the same time, it was really me. It is me. But it clearly connected me to, certain audiences because, well, here I am. Like, there's not some other dude who's making this up.
Right.
And so I remember with book one, in the couple years it took me to write that, the kids were quite young at the time. And, in my office at home, I would encourage them to, be in my office at nights or on weekends when I was writing, because I wanted them to see me pursue my passion in the hopes that, it would rub off on them. I mean, fast forward to now, they're 20, 19, and 16. I don't know if they've heard a word I've said. We'll see.
But if more is caught than taught, they were seeing you, and that was the goal, right? Like they were seeing you hone your craft, chase after a passion, and do something even outside of your, as you called it, boring work. You jumped into something else and threw yourself into it.
Yeah. And so I hope that's a recollection of them for them, and probably more pronounced because fast forward to right now, not that book, but The Geometry of Wealth, I basically took the core ideas there and transformed that into Shaping Wealth, this coaching and content platform. And becoming a first-time entrepreneur in my 50s is some form of insanity, but at the same time, my kids, my kids can observe that, like, okay, well, I've got these ideas that I'm passionate for. I've got clients and an audience that I care deeply about let's see where I can push that. So
Yeah.
hopefully they're observing that. But I've got three, you've got four kids. You know how it goes. You kind of hope they pick up some of the good stuff, and
Totally. Yep.
you never know.
I remember studying for the CFA exam. This was after already having all four kids, and I'm like, I'm going to start the CFA program. This seems like a good idea. And even in one of my like intro calls with another CFA going, hey, was it worth it? And he was like, yeah, it was great. It was amazing. My wife did call herself the CFA widow, though, because I loved the program so much. I was constantly studying. Anyways, but going through that, a huge sacrifice of time and energy, and I missed out on some things, but we knew it as a family going in each year. It was like, okay, this is going to be the 6 months. Dad is going to be less around, but he is going to be around on Sundays. We're going to carve that day off and make sure it's family time. And the kids joined in with it, and COVID happened, and my level 3 test got delayed, I think twice. And I still have this note on my desk that I could go grab right now. It's like, Dad, I think he said Tim. I think he called me by my first name. Tim, I'm sorry your test got delayed, and it's not spelled correctly at all. But like, man, feeling the empathy from your kid about something that meant a lot to you, those are experiences we can share with our family. And it doesn't have to be, separate or against them necessarily. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, those moments when it all bleeds together, those are the opportunities for to cherish, and opportunities for growth.
Yeah, for sure. So midlife crisis, that you called it, and I would encourage you. I think this is just me speaking. My theory is every 5 to 7 years, our work changes or looks different. Even if we're in the same position or same company, there's a change, because we've grown and we've learned in wisdom. As you jumped into writing, you did that alongside of another career, and that's a theme I feel like I hear a lot from people who have transitioned well. Is like, hey, I had this other thing already going in my mind, and even working out the business plan while I was still in this other job, knowing that a transition season was coming. Tell me about when you started Shaping Wealth and how you knew it was time for a new season, and what you did in that season to kind of figure out, well, what is next? How do I re-engage with work in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a quick background, which is that, I'm on my 5th career, and I've quit everything I've ever started. And that courage to quit has been at the source of whatever success that I've had over a 30 plus year career. I was in politics and academia, then investing, then writing and educating, now entrepreneurship. And, when the Geometry of Wealth was published, it landed well. These 2 words, funded contentment. I don't recall coming up with them. I came up with them. There wasn't like this flash of lightning or light bulb thing going off, but like, I remember vaguely, okay, I wrote that and kept going, and then people are like, oh, that really lands.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's so great. At the time, I was working for a big investment firm, and I was sort of head of investor education and behavioral finance and behavioral coaching. Worked primarily with financial advisors. Was on the road for several years. Met more than 4,000 advisors and tens of thousands of their clients.
Wow.
I gave a lot of talks, but I also tried to listen as much as possible. And, it was clear that, there was an interest in these ideas. There's a fabulous quote, one of my top 5 quotes of all time, from E.O. Wilson, he just passed a couple years ago, but he was a professor of sociobiology, the world's foremost expert on ants, but also has written a dozen books on the meaning of life. And he's really a wise, was.
I was going to say, what is sociobiology even?
Yeah, it's how animals get along. So he studied ants, termites, and humans.
There we go.
Ends up that we have a lot in common. We are pack animals. We are tribal. But we won't go down that path.
Yeah,
I don't think
so. You were saying your favorite quote from him.
Yeah, favorite quote. He said that he said at one point is that we're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. And it was clear, even not knowing that quote until later, but at the time, just providing perspective, getting away from the daily fray, not only of markets, but just of the noise of going to Walmart or Costco and having 10,000 choices, and going on, Expedia or Orbitz, and having a million different places that you can go. Like, we can get quite overwhelmed, and it's great to have choice, but having too much choice can be debilitating.
Yeah.
So it was clear within a short period of time that I wanted to do something with the book that would not have been possible as a W-2 employee of a big investment company.
Yeah.
So, I'll spare a couple wrinkles and twists and turns, but, it became clear at that point that I wanted to transform. I felt a bit of a calling. Like, okay, I want to put this in the world and see how it goes. I didn't know if anyone would pay for it. To some extent, still not sure. I mean, they are, but putting these ideas, the idea of funded contentment into the world, but the path to achieve funded contentment specifically, and appreciating that, and here we get a little bit narrow and wonky, appreciating that the financial advice business has transformed dramatically over the last generation, from being more transactional to being more relational. I call it the arc from Gordon Gekko to Brene Brown.
Yeah,
It used to
there
be
you
the
go.
case that Blue Horseshoe loved Anacott Steel. Bud Fox was a financial advisor, right? He put his best clients into his best ideas. He sold stuff. So now you think about, the empathy and emotional intelligence that we need to bring to bear to sit with people in a safe space where they can express to us, frankly, their deepest fears, hopes, dreams, regrets. All of that is kind of in the center of financial planning here
Totally.
in 2023. It's not that those conversations never took place 20 or 30 years ago, but as better than I do that financial planning as a profession has really just come into its own within like the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
So, the premise and the courage came from the fact that this is needed and that it's valuable. And like, we're now at the stage of the industry where it's kind of understood, or it could be understood, that financial advisors or planners, they're helping people along life's journey, and they're doing so wearing two hats as mechanic and guide. And the mechanical piece, you, Tim, your colleagues, the whole industry, you have massive amount of resources to understand how to build the right portfolio, how to purchase the right insurance, how to manage estates and optimize for taxes, and a series of mathematical or engineering problems. But math is easy and people are hard. And so you're not only a mechanic, you're a guide. And being a good guide is not just about common sense or high ethics. I mean, there's elements to that, especially on the ethical front. But we now know so much from what I'll broadly call behavioral science, all of the different fields of psychology, cognitive, evolution, positive, social psychology, neuroscience, all of these different disciplines, the field of emotional intelligence, however you would, define the boundaries of that. All of these are not only insights, but they speak to practical skills that advisors can learn and then transform into even better client relationships. I decided to hang my shingle to coach the coaches.
I love that. That's so cool. I was talking to a friend the other day. No, it was a couple years ago. He's a pastor at the church I go to, and we were just sharing stories, and I was telling him about a couple client experiences. A client who was passing away from brain cancer very quickly, and just how I was visiting her in the hospital, doing the people stuff of the business, the guide part. And at that point, she didn't need a guide. She didn't need, she needed the mechanics, and we were taking care of that stuff.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, I think you do more pastoring than some of what we do sometimes. And that just gave me a unique perspective of that role of guide that we play, and just caring for people and leading with empathy as they are sharing the most important stuff in their lives.
Yeah, we at Shaping Wealth, my colleagues and I, we work with a specific model of flourishing or holistic well-being with four parts: the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, and the financial. And there's the old line that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And
Yeah.
we have found this to be useful. Clients, meaning other financial advisors, have found this to be useful. I mean, there's 8-part models of flourishing. There's 7-part models. We have a 4-part model.
I like 4. That's a good way to go.
Yeah, four is good. To use an old Latin term from my grad school days, each of these is sui generis. Each of those forms of well-being is something in and of itself, and then they interact with each other in tons of complicated ways. But we are striving for physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial well-being. You think about the fact we, engage the idea that, well, we're not only doing it on our own, we need help. Well, who are the helpers? I grew up in Pittsburgh. Mr. Rogers was my hero. In times of danger, find the helpers. I mean, he had this very, sort of important perspective.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's easy to say, who are the helpers in 3 of the 4 well-beings? We have doctors, we have clergy, and we have therapists or counselors. And those are socially legitimate. Those are accessible. They're just part of our daily life, right? We're all working on stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes we deal with it ourselves, but other times we need help. Well, what about financial well-being? First of all, the concept's not as well understood.
Yeah.
I define it as safety and freedom now and later. There's a lot to unpack there. There's 4 words. But financial well-being, as a thing unto itself, we want to achieve that. We want to figure out where money fits into a meaningful life, as we, kicked off the top of the show. But who are the helpers there? Because obviously we need help. Well, maybe the default answer is financial advisor, but only 21% of Americans have a financial advisor. And I assure you that most of those 21% aren't having conversations like what you and I are talking about right now.
Right.
I know your day-to-day, you're engaging as both mechanic and guide.
Yeah.
But the industry writ large, not only in the US, but globally, it's coming along, but it's coming along in a lumpy way. It's coming along in a slow way. So this idea that we show up as helpers is, I think it's a powerful insight, and also leads to kind of an adjacent point that helpers need help.
Yeah.
In the US, by law, therapists have to be in therapy. For both doctors and for clergy, they have support groups. What we have found, because we now work with financial advisors in basically every continent, across many different countries, standalone one-person shops, platforms with 10,000 advisors. We're talking to a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
We're seeing the helpers needing help because, Tim, you and your colleagues and people in our space, you're now showing up as guide.
Yeah.
You're showing up on the deathbed moment. I mean, this is heavy duty.
Yeah.
And there's no Kevlar vest for the emotions that get exchanged during these times. And so, we've actually put together what I think is some pretty cool is not the word, like impactful programming on advisor well-being, because the helpers need help too.
Yeah. That's really powerful. And I love how you use the word calling to explore whatever that next career is. Was it easy for you to walk away from W-2 and walk into entrepreneurship? How did you walk away from that safety and security of that regular paycheck into something that was totally unknown, that you're still going, is this going to work?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, partly based on my conviction and belief in what I'm doing, but also because I have a wife who's loving and supportive.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, without Tracy, I couldn't do any of this, but, she has faith in me, and, it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy building, building something from complete scratch, to take this one idea of funded contentment, as I have talked to my partners and people at my firm, an idea is not a product, and a product is not a business.
Yeah.
And so to have the idea of funded contentment, well, that's something that's a great source of pride. And I don't even know if it's a new idea. It's just my framing on something that you and I and everybody else have been thinking about for, forever. But then, well, how does that become a seminar for clients? How does that become a coaching program for financial advisors? Okay, so we turn an idea into a product. I would say, for what it's worth, for people on the call who are listening, who are entrepreneurs and business builders, you all appreciate that just because you have some things that people want doesn't mean that you've built a scalable business. I would say that we've just entered year 3 of this. It's going really well.
Yeah.
But we're figuring out so much in terms of, okay, the interest and demand is there. how do we put this in the world that feels like it remains true to us as important work while still being highly commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've even pivoted a little bit just recently. You have a program called Outsourced Chief Behavioral Officer,
Mhm.
which is really a helpful tool for any advisor out there. And you've launched something new,
Yeah.
even this month?
Yesterday.
Oh, all right. There we go. So it's right now, guys, it's Wednesday, June 21st, depending on when you're watching this. So
Yeah.
yesterday, Tuesday, June 20th. This is summer solstice, by the way, longest day of the
Yes.
year.
Longest.
So
Yeah. I was just on Twitter with some friends going back and forth about how this is such a bittersweet day. It's
yeah,
the longest day of the year, but it just gets darker from here.
right.
Yeah. So Tim, the idea, in the context of the wealth management industry, is that behavioral finance is a hot topic. The
Mhm.
psychology of financial planning, hot topic. In fact, if you remember back in 2022, I don't know if you remember that year. It was about a year ago.
Yep.
The percentage of the CFP, Certified Financial Professional, Certified Financial Planner curriculum had 0% of its syllabus devoted to the psychology of financial planning.
Huh.
And last year it went from 0% to 7%. Okay, so now it's on the map. It's
Yeah.
official. So any CFP student out there, it's 7% of the curriculum alongside the investments and the insurance and the
Hmm.
estates and the taxes. So it's 93% mechanics, 7% guide.
Yeah.
If I would ask any financial advisor I know, how much of your time is devoted to building and deepening trust with advisors, they wouldn't say 7%. They
Yeah.
would say something larger than 7%,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But anyway, it is, it's on the map. And so what I'm trying to solve for as a business owner is, well, okay, there's a demand, there's interest and there's demand, but demand for what in particular? Most people want the cheap and easy way to any solution. I do. I won't say you do, but that's the way we're all, most of us are wired.
Yep.
And so we, some while back started offering deep dive immersive coaching programs. They're not cheap. They're very, very well reviewed and people love them. But, it's a big commitment, not only of money, but time and attention.
Yeah.
At the same time, most people, most of the time, they want a little bit here, they want a little bit there. And there's this idea of a chief behavioral officer that's out there in the world, not just in finance, but in consumer packaged goods and in
Hmm.
technology and in healthcare. It's basically, there's so much behavioral science now. How do you channel the insights from modern research to build better organizations, drive higher client satisfaction? So that chief behavioral officer or CBO role it's now all over the place.
Yeah.
A little bit, not a lot, in the world of financial advice. Well, our idea is, well, you're most people haven't heard of, let alone are going to hire a chief behavioral officer into
Right.
their financial planning firm.
Yeah. And so many firms, like you said, there's the solo financial advisor that's maybe just themselves and one assistant. There's tons
Yeah.
of firms that don't have the capacity to hire a full-time, let alone part-time position around that.
Yeah, there's one or two people, but even if there's 30 or 50 advisors and staff, like, well, what is a chief behavioral officer at the same so I would say 99.8% of firms do not want a chief behavioral officer. At the same time, I would say 100% of financial planning firms want to make better decisions, form sturdier habits, and achieve higher well-being,
Yeah.
which happens to be the purview of behavioral science.
Hmm.
So what we created is the Outsourced Chief Behavioral Officer. It's a subscription-based service. As of yesterday, June 20th, as you indicate, we have a freemium model. The word's sometimes hard to say. Freemium, meaning that it's basically a platform or a dashboard with a ton of resources, asynchronous content that you can consume, live coaching and workshops and things like that on time affluence and the psychology of goals and motivational interviewing and financial therapy and topic after topic after topic. So yeah, we have this platform. Anybody can sign. Anybody, you don't have to be a financial planner, because a lot of what we're doing underneath is basically training advisors and their teams in emotional intelligence. Some of those resources are now available for free. You just need to sign up, shapingwealth.com/OCBO. And then there is a paywall. And behind the paywall is like the heavy duty stuff. Like if you want a workshop with us, if you want coaching with us, My partner, two co-founders, one of them, Dr. Joy Leary, is PhD in psychology, expert in individual and family therapy, but also an expert in financial therapy. She holds monthly office hours. So basically, advisors from literally all over the world come to what is designed to be a safe space on Zoom. There's no agenda. It's not recorded. And hey, what's on your mind? And people show up talking about difficult client cases or frustrations at work. And you end up having, Tim, you should go to this thing. It's awesome.
Yeah.
People love it. I'm not allowed to go. Joy runs it. And once a month, there is an hour-long, window for people just to show up and say, geez, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I have this hard client case. Anybody else experience something like this? Or, I'm not getting along with my partner at work. And Joy is very expert at directing these conversations. Things like that behind a paywall that, we hope people will subscribe for. But, as of yesterday, you can get a handful of really good stuff for free.
That's awesome. And behind the paywall, I even noticed the one thing that stuck out to me was you guys have some great visuals for some of these complicated behavioral finance topics that are hard to put words to, and it's hard to say to a client, part of my job is managing your behavior. Like that doesn't come across well.
No, I'm here to fix you.
Yeah, right, exactly. So having some visuals around some of those struggles that everybody has because we're human, that was really enticing to me. But that meeting sounds amazing, especially because I feel like there's this epidemic of loneliness, and what you're doing is you're bringing people together and connecting them who have similar struggles and, similar values, which is really cool.
Yeah. To go down kind of the philosophical route for a second, if you go back to certain parts of kind of the Western canon and you read people like Rousseau and you think about the conceptualization of us as sovereign individuals, like, hey, you're born into the world, of course you're a person, and then you enter society and you enter social contract, and okay, I won't bore people with more than that, but
I'm just going to nod like I know who Rousseau is and all that stuff. So
yeah, exactly. So 18th century French philosophy.
There we go.
But the way I see it is that we are social creatures from the jump. That we were born from the moment we emerge into this world tied to others in a variety of different ways. And so that sense of connection, that deep, deep feeling that you are not alone is probably our most important sense of well-being. That works. There's concentric circles, there's Venn diagrams, there's so many different ways to think about that you are not alone vibe. So in the narrowest of wonky contexts for financial planners, for some reason I've built a career around folks like you, Tim, but like in this world of financial planners, this idea that you are not alone, that you're in the room alone with a client, listening to their most important stories about who they are and who they want to be. And you often don't have an outlet to share that experience with. So to create a space where you don't feel alone is in our view, I think that's a virtuous work that we're proud of. Secondly, real quick, it was just in the last month that the Surgeon General of the U.S. Released a devastating report on the epidemic of loneliness in America. And the fact that we've never been more connected via technology and social media, and at the same time, the statistics are harrowing. In terms of, who are our friends, if anyone? Who can we call at 2 a.m.? Like, what, why do we feel so lonely when there's 1,000 people on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Snap that you can, what's going on? It's a flummoxing time.
I think I've said this on this show before, but I was talking with my therapist and he talked about we're on like a bunch of islands smushed really close together, but they're all islands, and we're alone in that. And
that's a powerful image.
It's very, very true. So Brian, you are welcome to call me at 2 a.m. My phone is down in the kitchen and it's on do not disturb. So unfortunately,
well, thanks for the fake offer of help. It's really heartwarming.
You can call my wife. She's got the emergency phone in the room. But for me personally, I was like, I need this out of the bedroom. So
and that is the healthy way to be. And I'm sure I feel very blessed. I have some really special friendships. I have many 2 a.m. calls I can make, and I hadn't even thought about that until relatively recently when I
Mm,
saw it framed that way. And then
yeah.
I just sort of went through my mental Rolodex of sorts. And I was like, oh man, I actually do. There's some guys in the neighborhood and on the phone, and makes me feel very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. And I even love as you're looking at your business, and I'm sure scale is a word that probably comes up every once in a while.
Hmm.
But I always struggle as a financial advisor. Sure, we could grow the business and we could have thousands of clients, and we've just had this commitment to, you know what, the best clients we have are the ones we have deep relationships with.
Hmm.
And to have deep relationships, we can't have that many families who we're helping. We can't make the hospital trips, and we can't be at the funeral or at the wedding or the graduation if we have a ton of people. And so I love how you're making some of these really powerful tools around behavior and around how to lead clients in those conversations and making that accessible to so many
Yeah.
people. I even think of like the do-it-yourselfers out there, because there's a lot of them. You can do it yourself pretty much anything these days, except for changing, there's something on my stove. Anyways, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but
Right. Right.
but the do-it-yourselfers could sign up for your new free thing and
Yeah.
just hear what good advisors are doing out there and what kinds of things you guys are teaching.
Yeah. 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 No, I appreciate you raising that. And yeah, there's a few things that are free. The one that I think is the coolest is something that we just call weekly flow. Um, for us, emotional intelligence and empathy in particular is the superpower of the modern advisor,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of the superpower of the modern human. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about like just in the last 6 months, this chat GPT thing, like, have you had a single conversation in the last 6 months where this didn't come up? So I
Right.
don't know where we are on the clock, but it had to come
Yeah.
up at some point.
Yeah.
But
Right.
like what it means to be human and the relevance of us, compared to, these magical machines that sure seem pretty human to me.
Yeah.
And even thinking, rethinking of who I am as just a deeply flawed large language model. um, it's kind of a wild time. So, this weekly flow feature that is now, anybody could sign up for, we're tapping into the science and wisdom of emotional intelligence. There's 4 pillars to EI or EQ: self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and relationships.
Yeah.
And each of them is just a fascinating, well of insight and skill building. So unlike IQ, EQ is a skill that you can build.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like your vertical leap, you can go from 3 inches to 5 inches. You can't go from 3 inches to 3 feet, but we can all be better. And the goal is
Yeah.
not to be Oprah or Brene Brown. The goal is to just be a slightly better version of yourself. And
Yeah.
so what we do it's in the name, weekly flow: Monday intention, Friday reflection.
Hmm.
Every Monday we send out a snippet of things, takes less than 5 minutes to consume, to help you think about the week to come. And then every Friday you get something that says how'd it go and how you're thinking about next week. And the feedback's been like, oh, this is so simple but so powerful. And we're
Yeah.
like, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
so we hope people enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure they will. It sounds like I have to sign up for that too, which is awesome. So, Brian, you and I originally connected around the topic of generosity. Tell me about maybe the beginning of your generosity journey, and then also where you're at right now. Like who modeled that for you at first, and when did that really start to take hold for you?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like as I speak with or at you, a generosity journey sounds self-indulgent and arrogant.
It does, and that's part of the reason for this whole podcast is nobody's going to jump on the microphone and be like, you know what, I'm a generous person and here's what I've done. But I also believe generosity is only transferred through stories. So that's why I'm asking you about it, and people will know in minute 40 here that you're a humble guy and this is just your story.
Good. Okay. I don't want to come across as a jerk.
No.
I think it starts with a faith tradition.
Okay.
I wouldn't call myself religious, but I would consider me very strongly culturally affiliated with Judaism.
Okay.
And there's a principle from that tradition that you might be familiar with called tikkun olam, which is the idea of building a better world. That's what
Mm.
the term means in Hebrew, building a better world,
Yeah.
tikkun olam. And so I think, going way, way back, it was just sort of part of what you did or how you learned to be in the world.
Yeah.
That, the world is broken, but there's the opportunity to fix it. And maybe, in fourth grade in Sunday school, it was putting a quarter in the little thing that
Yeah.
clanked. And fast forward to, being a grown up with money, it's more than a quarter that goes into goes into a little jar.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can't say this is good. I haven't, totally explored this, but instinctually, I think that's where it comes from. I
Mm-hmm.
don't, my relationship with my parents is fraught. My dad was not a generous guy,
Mm.
but my mom was incredibly generous on a time basis,
Yeah.
meaning she volunteered a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ironically caused, some problems in terms of how much time she devoted, but it was inspirational to see, sort of the commitment to the community in different ways. Because when we think about generosity, it's just not money; it's also time and
Mm-hmm.
attention. It's a number of different resources that we can bring to bear.
Yeah.
So, that's sort of the deep track. That's the backstory.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, you fast forward to a life with kids, and hopefully you create an environment for them that involves both, sort of giving and boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
both generosity and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tracy and I have tried to build a home around that. I mentioned a while back that, who knows what they've been paying attention to or learning,
Yeah.
but it is clear from their behavior now as young adults that, they have a generous spirit. I think they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
For us, I mean, just in a very specific context, living on the north side of Chicago, the Wrigley Field's just a mile behind me, so we're right in the city.
Yeah.
The issue for us as a family is hunger.
Mm.
I think I was going to use a swear word. It aggravates us
Yeah.
to think about the fact that in a world of great abundance, you can have people not knowing where their next meal is coming from.
Right.
So the oldest operating food pantry in Chicago, called Common Pantry, is just a few blocks from us. And
Awesome.
as a family, we have volunteered a lot of time. We've given some money to that cause, and that's been special to us, not in an ego sense, but just knowing that, like, if you buy someone $1 worth of food, you're buying them a meal.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not going to get into some of this political stuff over, like, well, are they working hard? Should they be pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and all of that BS? And I'll leave it at that. It's just like they're hungry.
Yeah.
So just freaking feed them.
Yeah.
And let's deal with the big structural problems in addition to that. But if they're hungry, give them food.
Yeah.
That's been very definitional to the Portnoy family life in terms of thinking about, generosity, which translates then into gratitude and the fact that we do have a nice home and we've never once gone hungry. It's never occurred to us. So like most things in life, and especially in parenting, it's about modeling behavior more than it is words.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to think that, us sort of, I don't want to overstate how much we've done. We've done things, but being able to model some of that behavior and have it impact our kids, I feel like that's part of our generational legacy. I feel like that's a moral obligation, to be honest. And so, I guess I'll stop there. I mean, that's a good chunk of my generosity journey.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. That's exactly what I was looking for. Not like I had any preconceived notion, but it started with, again, I think this is how people learn it. And this is how we walk clients through this is, who modeled it for you for the first time? Like you had this duty when you were a kid with the quarter, and that was a behavior. It was a learned behavior. But because of that practice, like with any form of exercise, that muscle gets stronger over time as you exercise it. And now as a family, going to the present, you've found a cause that you care about, and it's not just that's nice, or you're doing that walk. It's something that you've gotten behind and said, you know what, this is important to us. It's important to us because it's something that breaks our heart, and we want to help be a part of changing it. And so showing it to your kids, I love the fact that for your kids, I think you're making something normal that's not normal. And if they,
you think it's not normal? What's the part that's not normal?
The generosity part, and going, hey, this is a cause we're going to invest time in, we're going to invest resources in, and being intentional around how we give our money away. I think a lot of giving is obligation or duty, and it's less so these days about going, you know what, I want to see that change, and I'm going to get behind it, and I'm going to do it regularly. And invest time in it on top of money, invest attention to it. So one of the things I love doing is bringing to light some of these causes that you care about. And, we can put in the show notes and go, hey, if this is something, if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, hunger is really important to us too. I didn't really have an avenue for where to give.
Yeah.
Brian, he's a smart guy. You could look at his LinkedIn profile and see all his degrees, and graduated from Michigan with honors, and go, oh, he knows where to give when it comes to hunger, and they can jump on board too. But I love that transformation over time, and it involved work, and it involved intentionality, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, the intentionality, I'm glad it's a good word, and it's a good word for people to noodle on, because one of my sort of bugbears of recent years has just been the whole notion of agency and what control we have over a world that seems somewhat uncontrollable. I think we have more agency than we realize, but often more than we want.
Right.
And it's like a bit of a pickle. Like, so what do you do with the agency? What do you do with your resources, your mental, your physical, your financial resources that you have a lot of discretion over? So the intentionality is key. And I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. And I love what you said about where you're giving and making sure, the dollar's going as far as it can. And it's important to research the organizations you're giving to. I also think there's part of that just exercising the muscle that's important too. And it actually happened to me today. I'm walking out of the barbershop, and there's a guy sitting there on the curb. And there was this little voice that was like, hey, ask him if he needs something. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. I got a podcast. No, I don't. And I walk by, and sure enough, he goes, hey, could I bother you for a second? And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And there's a CBD shop right there. He's sitting outside. He doesn't look like he's in a good spot. And I was like, hey, what do you need? And he said something about $1.75 and opening a bank account. And, I had $5 on me. I never have cash on me. And you know what? Who knows what I funded? But as I drove away, I thought of 3 more questions to ask next time that happens. How could I help in an even greater way? Had I not literally been forced into that position, which, like you, for me, giving is a faith thing, and it's a very spiritual thing. I was sort of thrust into that situation, and actually proceeding with it instead of ignoring him and walking away. It gave me a greater appreciation for what to do next time, and how to help further. Again, I could have done 100 things better in that situation. But the positive's more important than the fact that you could have done more or different. And we learn, we adapt, we pivot, we share, we teach, we do what we can. So I appreciate what you've shared. Yeah. Thanks so much. Brian, I want to be cognizant of time. Thank you so much for being generous with your time today, and even generous with your story too. I love that a lot of your writing just comes out of, hey, this is who I am, and these are the things that I've wrestled with that I want to pass on to my kids. That is very powerful. If people are looking for you, which I know they will be after hearing all that you had to say, where can they find you on the socials and stuff like that?
Yeah, pretty easy. So the company website is shapingwealth.com. So if you want to get familiar with who we are, that's a good first stop. In terms of socials, LinkedIn, just me, Brian Portnoy, type in my name. And on Twitter, there's despite everything that's wild about Twitter these days, the financial Twitter, the FinTwit community is robust and generous and learning oriented. In the Twitter context, I'm just at Brian Portnoy, so my full name.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. It was awesome just to even hang out with you for a little bit, and hopefully next episode, maybe we'll do it like in person, somewhere around Chicago.
I would even drive west to continue this conversation. How about that?
I love it.
I'd leave the city limits for you, Tim. Take that as the compliment it's meant to be.
That means a lot. All right. Well, thanks so much, man.
Yeah, you too.
Hey friends, if this episode impacted you in any way, would you share it with a friend right now? That would mean the world to me. Even better, could you leave a review of the show? Mention what part of this conversation stuck out to you. On the first Tuesday of each month, we're going to bring you more stories of great leaders who have learned what it means to be truly wealthy. You may not have even heard of some of these people. And you know what? It's not because they're not amazing. It's not because they're not successful. It's probably because they live their lives with great humility. And so they're not looking to make their name big or famous or great. They're doing their work with purpose and intention. And I feel like that's something we can all learn from. I'm learning right along with you. That's why I'm having these conversations, and I'm recording them so that you can listen in and grow as well. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.